let's recap Bring Her Back and everything that happened and what led up to that final moment that was just pure soul crush. Honestly, a soul crushing movie is what I called Bring Her Back. And if you want to skip right to the ending and skip the recap to the ending, then make sure you hit that timestamp above, but this is the recap right here. So the film opens up with a VHS recording of what seems to be a cult that are trying to bring someone back. And what we eventually see from this cult is that they are able to bring back a woman, and a man cries inconsolably. So we don't know exactly what this cult does, who they are, or how this VHS tape even came to be, but this is pretty much what the whole film is centered around, is bringing back the dead. And they do it through these VHS tapes that gives them clear instructions on how to do this, and that's what you basically follow here. Is a woman played by Sally Hawkins who is trying to complete this ritual to bring back her dead daughter, and she wants to use the foster children. So let's talk about the foster children and their whole ordeal with this whole ritual here. So this film revolves around Andy and Piper, who are the step siblings that lose their father after he slips in the shower, hitting his head and pretty much causing him to die right there. And Piper is also blind. That's an important thing to note here in the film. Now, what ends up happening here is that Piper and Andy are to be separated because Piper is younger and Andy's almost 18. But because Piper and Andy are so close, the CPS worker decides to go ahead and put them together. And also Laura, who is the new foster mother, decides to take both of them in because she just wants Piper, but she knows that Piper won't come along if her brother's not there. So she just wants the best, right? So we think. Now, Laura is a very interesting woman. She just recently lost her daughter, Kathy. She actually drowned, and she was about Piper's age as well. So that's another important factor to remember in this film. And one of the things that we also find out about Laura is that she does have another child in the house named Ollie. And Ollie is a very strange boy. He looks like he doesn't have a soul, and he is very quiet, doesn't talk. And when describing him to Piper, because Piper is blind, she says that Ollie has this sort of curly red hair, which he doesn't. He just has a buzz cut. So it's kind of weird already. Laura's lying to Piper about these things. We quickly see that Laura doesn't really want Andy around. She's very passive aggressive to him. One of the things we quickly realize is there's something odd going on between Laura and Ollie, as well as Andy, the older brother, realizes that first night that Laura likes to take Ollie into this shed late at night, and they do something in there, which he doesn't know what it is, but he tries to dismiss it as whatever. And he's also starting to wet the bed, which is something he doesn't do, but he maybe associates it with the PTSD he feels about his father's death, because he's also scared to go into the showers, which causes him to actually try and just clean himself outside. And we'll talk more about that towards the end, about the PTSD and all that. Now, one of the interesting things that eventually ends up happening is that Ollie is odd. But more than odd, he's a little bit violent. One of the first things that Andy notices is he hurts the cat that Laura has at the beginning when they first meet with him. So the next day that they are living with Laura takes them to their father's funeral, where Andy can't even look into the casket of his father, and he just lies to Piper that he did look into the casket and he looked peaceful, which Laura quickly dismisses and says, no, you didn't. You need to go back in there. And Piper gets upset because Andy had promised he looked in there, but he really didn't. And even Laura makes him look into the casket and actually says, kiss your father now. It's kind of weird, but he does. But she says, no, you don't kiss him on the cheek. I want you to kiss him in the mouth. This causes Andy to get out of there quickly as possible. And we see that Laura kisses the father in the mouth and even takes some of his hair. So Piper got upset as well with Andy because Andy had said their code word grapefruit, which means like, I'm being really honest with you right now. That night, Laura decides to give them a break and says, why don't we have some fun? Let's drink, let's party, all of this. Even though Piper's underage and so is Andy, it's just going to be for a little bit, right? Let's just have some fun, which they do. And then we see Piper pass out because, of course, she's young. We then see Laura and Andy sort of start to have a one-to-one. Laura says, I used to be a counselor, so you can open up to me, tell me how you feel. And Andy says, well, you tell me first, how did you overcome the grief you felt for Kathy when she died? Which Laura says, I never did. I couldn't leave the cemetery when she was buried, and I couldn't come to terms that she was gone forever. And Andy then opens up about his father abusing him physically, and even at one point he retaliated against Piper and hitting her because of how mad he felt that once his father got with Piper's mom, he felt his father was favoriting Piper and her mom, and that was the family he always wanted. So this caused Andy to act out to seek attention from his father, which in turn caused his father to lash out at him, beating him so severely sometimes that he wouldn't even remember the beatings. So it was pretty bad for Andy right there. That night, Laura then finds Ollie eating the tail of the cat, and she decides to go get Ollie cleaned up. And by doing so, she asks him if the ritual is going right. And through the mirror of the bathroom, we see a demon staring back at Laura. Really, it is so terrifying. We also find out that night that Laura has secretly been collecting her pee to pour it on Andy, so Andy believes he's peeing himself at night, which of course he isn't. It's just Laura trying to break him. Laura wants to break the psyche of Andy and get rid of him. This is truly what Laura's been doing this whole film. That morning, we see that Andy will be in charge of taking Ollie as Piper and Laura are going to go clothes shopping. Andy decides to let Ollie out of his room. He kind of feels bad for the kid and invites him to eat some fruit, but we see that Ollie starts eating the knife instead, cutting through his gums in one of the gnarliest scenes of the whole film. He runs out to try and take the boy to the hospital, which the boy refuses to do so because he cannot cross this white line, and when he does, he spasms all out of control. His stomach is bubbling, it's pushing out. Something wants to rip out of his stomach, but as quickly as we see this happen, we also see Laura arrive with Piper, and she loses it and lashes out at Andy for taking Ollie out, and she rushes with Ollie into the home to play the VHS tapes from earlier where we saw the ritual happening to find out what she can do to calm him down, and she quickly sees that drawing a circle on his forehead is what helps him to calm down. We then see Andy, as he has been trying throughout the whole film to take a shower, finally being able to get in there, but then due to his PTSD or whatever it may be, maybe the demon, he sees his father's dead corpse, and this causes him to fall and hit his head, but not before the corpse said she's going to die in the rain. But we do see that Andy ends up in the hospital. Laura then feeds Ollie the dead father's hair because Ollie wants to feast, but feast on what? Well, we're about to find out, because that same day we see as Piper and Laurie are watching old videos of Kathy, who is Laura's dead daughter, and we see that Laura gives Piper Kathy's old clothes and also gives her the same hairstyle almost. Laura then asks Piper if she would want to stay with her or call her mom, and Piper just says, you know what, it's too early to say that name to you, and also I think I want to go live with my brother once he turns 18, which causes Laura to be very upset. We see her take Piper to the shed, where she takes her to the freezer that's in there that's actually holding Kathy's dead body. It gets so morbid, y'all, really quick, and she makes Piper touch it, claiming it's just meat. Andy then is released from the hospital, and this causes Laura to freak out because she doesn't want him there. She wants him separated as far as possible from Piper so she can continue the ritual and get closer to her. We finally find out exactly what the ritual is she's trying to do from this VHS videos that she's watching, which we don't know where she got from, but she claims an angel told her about it. First, you must contact the demon. Second, you must mimic the deaf. Third, consume the original body. And fourth, regurgitate the soul. So what basically is happening here is, of course, we know the demon has been contacted. It is an Ollie, and the mimicking of the deaf is going to be Piper drowning just as Kathy drowned. And now we know as well that Ollie has to consume the body of Kathy as well and regurgitate this body, the soul, back onto Piper, coming full circle now. But of course, we do need this whole thing to be as precise as possible. And with Andy here, Laura feels she can't do this. So what she decides to do is go and kick it into high gear by taking drastic measures. She puts on Andy's body spray and then hits Piper as hard as she can while she's asleep. So she thinks that Andy did this. The next morning, Laura confronts Andy about this, and he says he didn't, and she says, well, you've hit her before, and you're only doing this because your father beat you as well. This causes Andy to completely lash out on Laura, breaking the wall, and this also causes Piper to ask Andy to just please leave and just let it go. Don't let this get even worse than it already is. We see as Andy goes back to the CPS office to tell the lady about what's going on, and that is where he sees the missing child poster for a kid named Connor that looks just like Ollie. So something's definitely up here, and the CPS lady says that Ollie is the name of Laura's nephew, which we did see in an old VHS tape with Kathy. So yeah, that definitely isn't Ollie, it is Connor, and it seems that Laura took this poor kid and is using him as a conduit of sorts with spirits and demons to bring Kathy back. Andy goes back with the CPS lady to the home, but back at the home we see that Ollie is chowing down on some wood and other various things, causing Ollie to break his teeth and rip his flesh in one of the most gruesome scenes I've seen all year for sure. Laura tries to stop this, but it leads to more aggression from Ollie, and then she's able to tell that it's time for the ritual, as when she draws the circle she can even hear her voice as well, so she lets Ollie feast on Kathy's body. Andy is leaving a voicemail to Piper as he goes to the home just in case something happens, proclaiming he loves her, that he wants to be part of her life forever, and that he actually did hit her at one point, but that was in the past, and his father actually did beat him, and that was because he would act out because he just wanted his father's attention. Andy and the counselor are soon to arrive, but Laura has now cleaned up nicely because she was also listening to Andy's voicemail as she had Piper's phone. She's almost able to pass lying to the CPS worker until the CPS worker does find some blood on her, and Laura then drops the front and reveals to the old coworker that she's trying to bring her dead daughter back. This causes the CPS worker to lose it and want to get out of there with Andy as quick as they can. They get in the car, but then we see that Laura collides with her car onto them and killing both of them. The CPS worker dies right away after the collision. Andy's still alive, but then Laura just drowns him in a puddle, and then now she's going to go finish her ritual. She goes to grab Piper, and we see that Piper hears Andy's voice, and she goes towards the voice, but it's coming from Ollie, who she grabs, and then we see that she's pretty much like, hold on, who is this? And Laura says, oh, that's just Ollie. And of course Piper remembers that Laura said Ollie had red curly hair, so now she's obviously lying about something, and this causes Laura and Piper to go have a back and forth. Eventually Laura is able to get the one up over Piper, and she goes to take her to the pool to drown in order to mimic the death of Kathy, and Ollie is right there ready to pass on the soul. Just as Piper is about to get killed, we hear Kathy call out to her mom from Ollie's body, and this causes her to just completely lose as she freezes, and Piper's able to escape and get rescued. With the ritual now like paused or broken, we see that Ollie's able to get out, or should we say Connor, because this is indeed Connor. Ollie was the name of Laura's nephew. She was just using this as a way to cover up things, but Ollie is not Ollie, he is Connor, the missing child. He's able to cross over from the line, which causes him to spasm, and he also sees that the missing poster is there, so he realizes who he is, and it seems that everything inside of him now gets out, and then he is rescued by authorities. We then see a shot of Laura with Kathy's dead body in the pool now, and we see that it seems Laura has died, I believe, or drowned. I don't know what the case may be here, or if she's going to get arrested. It was a beautiful and tragic shot for sure at the end, where you see Laura holding her daughter's dead body that is decomposed in the pool. Piper listens to the voicemail that Andy left for her where he says he loves her, and then she spots a plane flying, which is very important because this was something that Piper and also Andy came up with, that when somebody passes away, it's almost like they're taking a next flight out. So I think that this is reassuring for Piper to see that her brother is basically that plane flying away. So what the hell just happened in this film? Now, I'm not too entirely sure who exactly did call out for mom, whether it was Piper or whether it was Kathy, because I originally thought maybe it was Kathy from Ollie's body, but also Piper could have just called Laura mom because she knew how much that would mean to Laura and eventually would make her freeze up because of that. So that was something I was interested in knowing, is who exactly was the one calling out for Laura. Maybe I'll watch it again and see for that myself. So let's talk about the ending and what exactly happened here, because I think this ending truly is one of the most devastating endings I've seen in a horror movie in a long time. Let's start off with the cult, the ritual, and all of that. The ritual, of course, is very interesting. We don't get much about who this cult is or who's doing this, who even filmed this VHS tape. It doesn't give us anything about that, and I'm okay with that. I don't need to know. It makes it creepier that this is out there and somebody could just find it like Laura did and try to reenact it. But the basic principles here are contacting the demon. So of course, first you have to conjure a demon of sorts. And I think something that's not spoken is that you need to have a conduit of sorts, a middleman. In this case, it was Connor, who Laura took in order to use him in this way. And it seems that Connor wasn't going to make it probably after the ritual was done. And so you contact the demon and then you mimic the death. And of course, the death of Kathy was drowning. So Laura had to have Piper drown in order to pass the soul of Kathy onto Piper. So this was the next step where Laura was on. After we also had to have the body be consumed, which we did see Ollie was doing already. So Laura was already getting her like ritual in place. So we had the demon contacted, we had death being mimicked, and we had the original body being consumed. All that was left to do was to regurgitate the soul. And of course, the soul of Kathy was supposed to come out and be on Piper in order for Kathy to come back to life. And I thought that that was such an interesting way to really showcase this, because I think that there was more than one soul inside of Ollie, because we did hear Andy call out to Piper. And I think the reason that Andy called out to Piper was so Piper could realize that Laura had been lying to her this whole time. When she touched Ollie, she realized that Laura has been lying, so she's been lying about other things as well. Now, I'm not too entirely sure who exactly did call out for Mom, whether it was Piper or whether it was Kathy, because I originally thought maybe it was Kathy from Ollie's body, but also Piper could have just called Laura Mom because she knew how much that would mean to Laura and eventually would make her freeze up because of that. So that was something I was interested in knowing, is who exactly was the one calling out for Laura. Maybe I'll watch it again and see for that myself. So of course, some of the things we do want to know is, what is this ritual? Who is this cult? Now, we don't get those answers, and I think that's the best way here to approach this, is that this is just unexplainable, and it makes it that much more creepier. Where the hell did Laura get this? She worked in protection towards children this whole time. Was this something she found one day protecting children? Was this something that she seeks out? Did somebody find Laura and single her out and give her these VHS tapes to do because they knew the grief she felt? These angels, she calls it, are they just in fact demons pretending to be angels, trying to give you a miracle, but in fact they're trying to give you a curse of sorts, because none of this looked angelic or nice at all. And that's one of the creepiest things about all of the things happening here in Bring Her Back, is that they're always credited towards the angels doing this. But is it really the angels? That's a big question right there for sure. And I think that one of the things that Bring Her Back truly does feel is grief. We've had so many tremendous films about grief this year, from The Shrouds, The Surrender, and now we have Bring Her Back. These are films that tackle grief from various standpoints, and I think Bring Her Back really does its own thing with grief, how it can overcome a person to the point that they're unrecognizable. Just as Wendy, the old co-worker that worked with Laura, couldn't recognize who this woman was anymore due to her grief, we also see that grief can bring people together, just as it did at one point with Laura, Andy, and Piper. After their father's funeral, they were able to get a bit closer to Laura, and we saw Laura opening up a little bit more, but it's her own grief that ends up consuming her and isolating her from the rest of the world. She is literally in a circle far away from everybody else because she is that consumed by her grief here, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to make that grief go away, that feeling, that dread. She just wants to be with that person she loves, truly feel that void that that person has left now that they're not around. And I think that that was something that Laura just couldn't come to terms with Kathy. She just wanted Kathy to be there. So the moment she heard Kathy or Piper say Mom, whoever it was, right, in her mind it just sounded like her daughter. So of course that was the only thing she wanted. She kept saying that throughout this film. If she could have one thing, is just to hear her say Mom once more, and she does hear that. And I think that that was just enough for Laura to say, you know what, what am I doing here? And just be able to let go of sorts when she lets go of Piper. But she never really did let go of that grief, though, because we do see her still holding on to it physically, of course, to Kathy's dead body that is now pretty much like rotting away. One of the most intense scenes of the whole film. Of course, I think Piper feels everything's going to be okay after she sees that plane, once we see that Andy, of course, is dead, and Piper hopefully will get a better life. In terms of Connor, who was being called all this time, he was just a kid that got abducted by Laura in order to be used as sort of the middleman, as a conduit, as a vessel of sorts for these demons and the souls to be put into until they were able to be transferred. So I don't know what the hell that Connor's going to do, because I think Connor's going to need a ton of like therapy after all of this. Honestly, this kid went through some brutal shit throughout the whole film, so really gotta say that Connor's gonna be messed up. And I think also the storyline with Andy and his father and the PTSD and trauma, I think that we sort of bring with ourselves, and we saw that Andy's had that trauma since he was a young child, and eventually that trauma led into him lashing out at his sister, because when you don't check your trauma, it truly does turn into a negative, and that was what really almost brought their whole relationship down. But Andy was able to really come to terms with it by the end, and I'm very curious what this could mean for possibilities with Bring Her Back. And we've heard before that the Philippous have kind of hinted that this could all be in the same universe as Talk to Me, so these demons are taking advantage of people in Australia, it seems. That's what I'm getting here, but we'll talk more about that in another video. Stay tuned for that next week once more people see the film. But let me know what you thought about the ending. Truly a great film. I think that tackles grief in a way that I think a lot of people see it as this monster of sort that consumes you, and I think that grief in itself can bring a lot of people together in this shared feeling of hopelessness, of sadness, and all that. But at the same time, as we saw it in Laura's case, can isolate someone, and isolating in them enough can turn them into something they never thought they would become. And we see that Laura knows what's going on here is not good. It's not what she should be doing, but she just can't help but to do that. And I think the Philippous also bringing their own experiences that they felt with grief during the time of this movie, when they were writing it, when they were producing it and all of that, really added another layer, which I've talked already before in other videos if you want to go check those out as well. But they did talk about sort of this grief in their family that they shared, as well as with a close friend. And it is just one of those movies that you really got to sit with and think. And I think on a second viewing experience, you truly see a lot more through it. So I would definitely want to check it out again. But definitely the ending is one of the most tragic. We just see Laura with her dead daughter's body just there in the pool where it happened. She couldn't let it go. She went back to where it all happened, and it's just there. She got consumed by her grief and drowned in it, pretty much is what I'm getting here. I don't remember if she was alive or not, but I did remember she was just in the pool, but the pool was full, so I'm wondering what exactly happened there. But yeah, definitely one of those movies that I think I will not forget for a while, and definitely one of my favorites of the year. It is my #1 film of the year so far, but let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. As always, that's going to do it for me. Make sure you follow us wherever you can. We're on the road to 50,000 subscribers, 10,000 away from that. Check us out on TikTok as well. We're trying to get to 10,000 followers over there. And as always, that's going to do it for me. Let me know what you thought about Bring Her Back, and if you're excited for Talk to Me 2 as well. And which movie do you like more, Talk to Me or Bring Her Back? Make sure you comment down below. But as always, I'll see all of you next time. Stay safe, stay positive.